Hi. In this module, we're going to be exploring adult-centered learning. Adults learn in different ways than children and teens do, probably because they have the option to walk away. In fact, we know that there are many styles of learning and that the academic situation in which most of us grew up is really only geared towards one style of learning. When we're dealing with adults learning in the church, another way of thinking about this is when we're talking about discipleship and learning how faith and life and circumstances interact. It's particularly important that we pay attention to how it is that adults learn. So they'll get the most out of it and there'll be a higher degree of satisfaction. So in this first of two videos, I want to speak to you just briefly about learning styles. And there are many different charts of learning styles. I'm using a 4-stage learning style chart, but you can find others that may be of interest to you if you want to explore this further. So we're going to talk about the 4 styles of learning. When we talk about learning styles, simply put, learning styles are different methods of learning or understanding new information. Learning styles are the way in which a person takes in, understands, and remembers information. While most of us may have one general idea about how we learn best, often it comes as a surprise to discover that we have different ways of learning, and just as we have different ways of learning, so do other people. And so we're going to explore 4 learning styles so briefly. The first group we're going to speak about are visual learners, and they learn best through seeing. So when you're talking to them, you want to use tools like diagrams, flowcharts, pictures, and symbols. They can be key to understanding new concepts. And most university-style lectures tend to neglect the visual components, so it's not a good model necessarily for us to use all the time in our teaching and in our preaching. For visual learners, it's often far easier for them to recall work with images as opposed to words. They will picture an image in their head while recalling it. Other tricks to try for visual learners include rearranging your material. Instead of writing across the page horizontally, write in a way that's more descriptive of what's being described. Write the words in a circular pattern if that more truly represents the relationship you are describing. You can also color your notes to create more visual stimulation. A second group of people are auditory learners, and they're the ones who learn through listening. So they learn through lectures and tutorials and group discussions and sermons. But when we use the traditional format of sermons, we're only speaking to a portion of the congregation. Sometimes auditory learners are helped by reading a text out loud, so they hear how words sound. They like group discussions about concepts and topics, and that helps them to anchor those concepts in their real life. If you're handing out note pages for your learning exercise, leave lots of extra room. And then you can return to those as people discuss the subject in more detail. That's the way auditory learners do best. It probably won't surprise you to learn that read-write learners learn through, shock, reading and writing. As such, The styles of university courses tend to suit them pretty well. There are plenty of textbooks and there are study notes galore. But that's not the way a lot of your congregation learns. If you're a read-write learner, you probably pay a lot of attention to textbook glossaries. Better yet, you probably make your own as you read through. You review your lecture notes, you read them over, and you create study notes. Lists are a useful tool for you. So, what are you going to do for the average read-write learner in your congregation? They might actually prefer or benefit from a note or an outline of your sermon or your study topic. And finally, kinesthetic learners learn through doing, which is perhaps the most challenging learning style for our congregations, but has great potential when we're thinking about discipleship and living into our faith. In the university setting, there may not be many opportunities to engage in hands-on learning. We don't do many labs or tutorials in theology. So if you're working with a group of congregants, try and think of ways to absorb all their senses in a meaningful and a realistic way. These are the people who may enjoy and may most benefit from doing hands-on things, whether it's around the church or in the community. These are the people who learn best by doing. They like practice questions that they can try things out. They want to experiment and see what the results are. As I mentioned earlier, although most of us will have a sense of our own learning style, we may be surprised to discover what our style really is. So, if it's a challenge, how do you know? Well, there is what's known as the VARK 16-question survey, designed to help you identify your own learning style, and I'll include a link to it in the notes for this module. Here's an example. A new movie has arrived in town. What would most influence your decision to go or not go? I heard a radio review about it. I saw a preview about it. I read a review about it. In this example, I heard a radio review about it would be most indicative of an auditory learner. I saw a preview of it would be that appeal to a visual learner. I read a review of it would be particularly impactful for a read-write learner. So visit the VARK site and take their test and see what you learn about yourself. Finally, although many of us remain fairly constant in our learning preference throughout time, styles can and do change regularly. This can be influenced by your learning environment. Perhaps after several years of being at university, you've learned to be a read-write learner because that's what you need to do to survive. So taking the VARK test, the VARK test, may help you to discover your current learning needs. You'll discover that you probably have a preference for one type of learning, although you may respond well to other styles as well. It is possible, though, to be a multimodal learner. In other words, somebody who learns equally well from different modes of instruction. One caution: Although you may discover your own learning style, it's important to remember that when you're dealing with a congregation of people, there will be other styles present. And so you need to be accommodating of all over time. You may not be able to cram it all into one, but over time, you might want to keep in mind different ways of helping people to learn. The second video in this module is by my friend and colleague, the Reverend Robin Brown Hewitt. Robin has been in ministry with the United Church over a number of decades. She's served in congregations. She served in program roles in the national and the regional church. She's been involved in the leadership structure at the Tatamagouche Learning Center, and she's currently the United Church chaplain at Dalhousie University. She's quite a gifted instructor, and she has a lot to teach us, and she's going to share with us one particular mode of how adults might learn. I hope you enjoy her presentation.